So the Romanian deadlift and the stiff-legged deadlift are very similar in nature. However, they are very different movements.
I've been doing things that they told me I should never do. I've been doing things that they told me I could never do now. Never do, I could never do. I've been looking back and I'm the only one who ever knew. My dreams begin to turn out.
Sup team, welcome back to the channel. Coach Krys here, strength and conditioning specialist at the Natty Hour. In today's video, we are going to talk about the biggest differences between a Romanian deadlift and a stiff-legged deadlift. So the Romanian deadlift and the stiff-legged deadlift are very similar in nature. However, they are very different movements. What differentiates these two movements is the primary muscle group that is being targeted. So the stiff-legged deadlift, just as it sounds, is a stiff-legged deadlift, where the legs remain in the same position and your knee flexion, so your forward knee travel, isn't increasing as you hinge your hips back. What this does is ensures that your hamstrings are the primary muscle group that is being targeted throughout this range of motion. However, the Romanian deadlift, as you hinge back, you will notice that your knee travel, so your knee flexion, increases during the hip hinging movement. As we increase our knee flexion, this is actually going to reduce the activation in our hamstrings and transfer that activation more so to our glutes. So even though they're very similar movement patterns, the primary muscle at which is being targeted in these movements is very different. Regardless of which variation you are utilizing, we need to understand your active range of motion first and foremost. So when you're performing any type of deadlift variation, the biggest thing is to focus on driving your hips back until your glutes no longer go backwards. So if we are hip hinging, I want to continue to bend my hips forward until my glutes no longer go back. So that's kind of my active range of motion right there. So don't pay attention to my knee angle as of right now. Paying attention to how far my hips go back. That's how I know that I'm at my stopping point. A lot of people make the mistake where they continue to bend further forward, and what that's gonna do is take that activation out of your glutes and your hamstrings, and it's gonna transfer it towards your back. So a good test for this is to do the wall test. So with the wall test, this is how you can kind of figure out where your ending range of motion is. So I would take a few steps away from the wall, and you can kind of glide your hands down your thighs just to see when your stopping point is. As soon as my glutes hit the wall, I'll take a couple of steps further forward to see if I have even greater range of motion. So if I continue to do that again, as you can see, my glutes kind of stop there and they're not hitting the wall, and I'm falling backwards in order to make my glutes hit the wall. So that's how I kind of know that I can step a couple steps back, and my active range of motion is going to be cued based off of where my hands go on my thighs. So typically for me, it's gonna be right below my knee joint. So that's pretty normal for a lot of people, where they wanna focus on coming down right below their knee joints. Some people, it's gonna be mid-shin. This is gonna depend on one's limb length. So it just depends on the individual, but the biggest thing is to find that active range of motion and understand that's your stopping point. You don't get any additional benefits by continuing to go further forward. You're at that active range of motion where your glutes stop moving backwards. All right, so now that we know what our active range of motion is for any type of hip hinging movement, now we can take it a step further and start to isolate specific muscle groups that we want to target. So if the biggest area of focus for you is to grow your hamstrings, then incorporating a stiff-legged deadlift is going to be an excellent option for you. If the goal is to grow your glutes, then making sure to prioritize a Romanian deadlift is going to be your best course of action. Depending on the individual, I would recommend that you ensure that all muscle groups that you are trying to target are well balanced. Probably still a good idea to make sure that you are prioritizing both variations, but depending on the individual, maybe your goals are to focus more on glutes, less on hamstrings, then picking the appropriate deadlift variation is going to be extremely important. Okay, so stiff-legged deadlifts. We know what our active range of motion is right now. Biggest thing that we want to focus on is making sure that we feel a good stretch in our hamstrings and that our knee bend is not increasing as we are hinging backwards. So I still keep a slight bend in my knees. We're going to drive our hips back and make sure that our knee angle is not changing at all. There's my active range of motion. I feel a pretty good stretch in my hamstrings, and then we're going to come back up. So we're going to be breathing in on the way down and then focusing on breathing out on the way back up. So now moving on to the Romanian deadlift. Again, our knee angle is going to be changing as we hinge backwards, which is going to help target the glutes much more. So same thing with our active range of motion. However, if you pay attention to my knee flexion, it increases as we hinge back. So as we go down, you can see my knees are bending more as I come down, and then we're going to come to our active range of motion and then come back up where our knees start to straighten. There's still a bit of a bend in my knees at the top, but as you can see, like I said, our knee angle increases as we hinge backwards. So coming back up, as we hinge backwards, again, focusing on breathing in, and then to stand back up, we're gonna breathe back out. So when it comes to deciding which movement pattern you should be prioritizing, it is clear that one movement is not better than the other. And that's just due to the fact that they both target different muscles. Therefore, they both can and probably should be programmed into your training block if your primary goals are to have a well-balanced physique. Because at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, you can never have big enough glutes and hamstrings. Alright team, that is it for today's video. If you found it to be helpful, do me a huge favor. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. Videos every single Monday. I will see you guys in the next one.